So, welcome to another episode of season 3 of the Brain Fruits podcast. In this season, we will focus on how to engineer your future. I talk with TEDx speakers, founders, and entrepreneurs that share their stories and advice to shape sustainable emotional and financial success, especially in the tech and finance sector. In this episode, you can really look forward to getting the tools and tactics that will help you convince and lead your organization to make better decisions because you will be flowing. What do we mean by flowing? Well, today I have here Kristel Tuul. She's a certified women's high performance coach. She's very passionate about tapping into women's unique biology and their feminine masculine traits to help women effortlessly thrive in life. She will share with us how to build sustainable emotional and financial success in your career. So I'm super excited to welcome you, Kristel. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your flow from the tech world into the coaching world?
Yes, first of all, hello, Hannah. Hello, everyone listening. Thank you for having me. And yeah, as Hannah, you said, I am Kristel. I'm a women's high performance coach. And I consider myself a citizen of the world, as I've lived in 6 countries and I've traveled to over 40. And I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years now. This is my 5th business. And I've been on the path of kind of conscious self-development for 14 years now. So I'm really passionate about the things I do. Flow from startup world or the tech world to coaching world. So before coaching, I was mostly in 2 industries. It was door-to-door sales and then tech. And my big challenge was I was a successful workaholic who burned out 2 times. I struggled with perfectionism and I never felt like it was enough. So what that meant, I had this strong conviction that in order to achieve success, you have to work really hard and sacrifice yourself, which then I did. I was constantly like wired, anxious, stressed out, and I disconnected from my body because I was exhausted. I had irregular periods. So I had to disconnect from my body in order to, perform. And there were 2 pivotal moments that really changed my ways. One was in 2012 as I was graduating university in England. So I was doing door-to-door sales at the time, full-time. It was in America, but during the rest of the school year, you train and lead teams. And then I was also full-time doing my bachelor's degree. And I remember 3 weeks before graduation, I just looked up at the sky and was just this aha moment that Kristel, if I constantly strive to create a better future for myself and I never learn how to live in the present moment, that better future will never come.
This power of now, I think that you're referring to here now, is a really big hype also. Would you say that nowadays you achieve to be in the moment?
I knew in that point, I knew I needed to change, but I had no idea how. So I actually got a coach for a year who taught me how to relax, because I truly believed resting is a waste of time and sleep was my lowest priority. So it was really, really like very extreme lifestyle. So yeah, that's why one of the reasons why I love coaching, because it helped me so much to actually learn how to be. And great story is I started with looking at a candle. That was how I learned to be in the present moment. So my coach gave me an exercise. Just look at a candle for how many seconds you can, and then just do it regularly and then extend it. And I just started doing that. And me and my girlfriends, we went to like cafes when we looked at candles. So it became this huge thing. And that really, really helped me. But however, so in 2014 and 15, I burned out twice, so back to back.
Wow.
And it was because although I was getting better with energy management and being in the present moment, just the environment was really hardcore. So in 2014, I burned out from door-to-door sales, not just because of work overload, because there was values conflict and kind of insufficient reward for me. And then I went to the tech world. I joined a startup. And then very quickly, like 2 months later, we got accepted to one of the world's top 3 accelerators in the world. So it's called 500 Startups in Silicon Valley, where we spent 6 months. And it's very, very hardcore. And we knew people who went to the accelerator said that they all burned out. And when you burn out back to back, we took a few months off. And then I think like a year or 2 later, that was kind of like kind of like I've had enough. So I started an online marketing agency, I think like 2 years later, which kind of helped me have more free time to really, because my main mission became how to find success in a way that's more enjoyable and sustainable.
I love your trajectory, and I just want to go back here that I find it really interesting that you started out as like head of sales and went over to become board member. You were head of digital growth and performance, and as you say, also like as a mentor for the Nordic Tech Accelerator. You've been very heavily involved in the tech industry, and especially in those roles where it is always quite an intense environment, and maybe not everyone here knows what flow is. So it's really a state of mind in which a person can become fully immersed in an activity. So it is something quite active. It comes from a positive psychologist, Mihály Csíkszentmihályi. So while in a flow state, people are highly involved and focused on what they're doing. So they're really much in the now, as you say. It's like the ego falls away, time flies, every action, movement, and thought follows really just inevitably from the previous one. It's like playing an instrument. Your whole being is involved and you're using your skills to the uttermost. So I love this definition of flow. Why do you think flow is so important nowadays, especially when we talk about leapfrogging into a more and more digital world?
Flow almost embodies emotional success. And what I mean by emotional success is not just having positive emotions and feeling great. It's also having high life satisfaction, having great physical health and energy, positive relationships, self-acceptance. You're having purpose and meaning in your life. You grow personally. You're engaged in your life. You feel like you're competent in accomplishing challenging tasks. You have autonomy. There's all of these things. And why it's so important, why that emotional success is important, because it helps us to be fully human and live a full existence, right? It's really not about just being super, like going through your life, being really comfortable and happy, because that's one of the reasons why a lot of millionaires and Olympic winners, like when they achieve that success, they feel like, well, what else? Because like just everything falls away, they become depressed, right? You really have to have that purpose and mission and intrinsic motivation to even be in flow, and also boosts kind of that motivation. And the great thing about flow is you can create flow in any part of your life, but typically flow naturally happens in a outside of work environment, like surfing, like extreme sports is a great example, like surfing or climbing or snowboarding or something like that. And when you are in flow, then the benefits of your confidence is heightened, and then your overall life satisfaction, and then you can you feel your best, you perform your best. That feeling carries over to all aspects of your life. So McKinsey did an interesting study of 10 years around flow, and what they really discovered is flow boosts performance like 500%. So basically, if you spend
500%.
one day,
How do you measure that?
they measure it. If you spend one day in flow, you can basically get an average worker's 1 week worth of work done. I think it was qualitative and some part quantitative. And creativity typically is boosted 430%, which is pretty crazy. So you can have all these amazing breakthroughs that you feel like, I'm creative, you feel that confidence, but you also have the financial success of you do your best work. And the reason why it happens is that, so typically when we work, our conscious mind works, and we work through our conscious mind, which is in our prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of our brain. But in flow, our prefrontal cortex actually shuts off and our subconscious takes over, and our subconscious mind is 500 times faster than our conscious mind. And that's kind of like why flow can have all of these great benefits.
I love all these topics around the two parts of the brain, as you say it here. As in economics, we call it after system 1 and system 2, right? We probably have also read the book from Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Slow, Thinking Fast, which talks about, very similar as you do here, about what part of the brain is activated depending on the activity you're really immersed in. And I think this like deep thinking, as you referred to. So the system 2 is often not triggered enough in our society anymore, because we don't allow it for so much space, because, as you say, a lot of our activity and our time is spent in these very high performing cultures where there's little time to actually get immersed into one activity for a longer period of time. One actionable item, what we do here, what I can share from Pleo, for example, is we have focus time. So what we allow across the organization is a specific time blocker where you should not book anyone for any meeting. And I also really try to make it a habit to turn off my notifications, to like not look into any social media, because that definitely immediately interrupts my workflow. I think it's a good call out for everyone to go surfing more and to start climbing or bouldering. Looking at the other side of the coin, we have a lot of problems nowadays with digital burnout and the increasing prevalence of depression, especially in the tech and finance sector. What is going on?
Yeah, it's I mean, I've seen burnout in the tech world for over 10 years now. So, but it's getting worse and worse, right? And it was an interesting study that actually came out this month by McKinsey. It's the largest study done on women in the workplace, and they call it the Great Breakup. It's because women female leaders are leaving their careers and they're demanding more from their work. So first of all, I think it's important to understand what also actually causes burnout. There's 6 reasons for it. So one is work overload, but that's not like, it's only one of them. And other 5 are you have a values conflict. So your values are not aligned with your company's or your bosses, managers' values. There's lack of control. So that's actually one of the things that came out from the McKinsey study, is that women they said that there's lack of flexibility and lack of autonomy in the workplace, which is causing them to leave. And that's actually one of the things what causes burnout. There's lack of control of how you work, and then there's insufficient reward. You feel you're not recognized or are taken for granted. There's unfairness. You or others are kind of treated unfairly, and there's breakdown of community. So there's lack of teamwork, lack of conflict resolution, lack of feedback. So I think these are the main 6 reasons what cause burnout that are kind of feeding that overall burnout and depression we're experiencing.
This value conflict that you're highlighting here as well, this is something I really believe is so important to check in with when you're joining a company, or also when you're working together with people. I think it's often very good to kind of highlight, what are your values and how do you connect to either an entire organization or even to people that you work together with? Because if you have value conflict, it's very difficult to work together, like literally with a company, to work for a company. If you find that a company does not reflect what you value most in life, then it's going to be very difficult and creates a lot of this internal friction, as you point out here. There's some other research, of course, on this done. The Harvard Business Review found that 85% of employees, especially now after the COVID crisis, feel that their well-being has deteriorated. It's well established that when workers' well-being is compromised, so too is their productivity. And this is also what you highlighted here more in the positive manner, with the 500% increase from a McKinsey study of productivity when people are in flow. There is also a big annual report here from Microsoft that is on the next great disruption in hybrid work, which is talking a lot about the problem of burnout. One of these like work trends that we face, a workforce that has high productivity, but it is masking an exhausted workforce. So it looks like, oh, with hybrid work or even with like remote work, we're also productive. But increasingly, our entire workforce is becoming more exhausted. The report really states that digital exhaustion is a real and sustainable threat. I was quite surprised when I thought that. I'm always having a hard time to see like digital exhaustion as a real thing. I'm like, it's a real problem. And the constant barrage of digital communication, expectation of responsiveness, especially, and urgency is really depleting workers. Why are we experiencing this digital burnout, especially? well, we have like these work days that never end, right? Like if you're back in the office, then maybe you go home afterwards and that's it. You tend to then immerse in other activities, but especially with the hybrid model or even with working remotely, employees are really now struggling to have the off button on.
Yes.
And it's, I think also our ways of working are incongruent with our brain and body's biological requirements, which means that with these increasing digital demands, multitasking becomes a problem, constant distractions also becomes a problem. These are all things that for me don't really sound flow-like. How can I get into a flow state?
Two big reasons why we're experiencing digital exhaustion. So one of them, I think the big thing, and that ties into flow, is we are still in a time management mindset instead of an energy management mindset. Are literally our biologies. We are physically not capable of, working at a high level, like 10, 12 hours straight, not even like 4 hours straight, right? So our biology ebbs and flows. Roughly every 90 to 120 minutes, we should be taking 7 to 20 minute break of active recovery, where you just kind of like do nothing and you allow your body to kind of release all the toxins that have been built up, to regulate your mood, your blood sugar, but also for your brain to organize all the information that you've just learned, to process it. Actually, that's where the creative insights happen, is during those recovery breaks, because your brain starts making new connections. So it needs that recovery, right? And that's one of the things. Flow is also, it's not just a state, it's a 4-step process. So you just cannot be literally in flow state for like 24/7. You have to go through 4 key steps in the flow cycle. And one of the key steps is recovery. So it's also part of the energy management, right? So after flow, there's always recovery, because flow takes a lot of energy because you get so much out of it. So you have to recover, then there's struggle phase, and then there's a release phase, right? Actually, the more they rest, the more they can actually work. And the second part, I think that's really difficult, is boundary setting. We have to set boundaries stronger and more than ever before. And it's really, really uncomfortable, and it's difficult in a corporate world, right? Yeah. Especially, how can you say no to your boss who messages you or in all hours of the day and like weekends? And like for some of my clients, like one, she's a leader in a finance company. So she has meetings, like people book meetings in her calendar, like at random times, and she'll go, I have to be there for my team, like, okay, these meetings are important, but there's no regulation, okay, like, and it's hard for her to do her job because there's so many meetings. And there's what I wish there could be more of in the culture level is also like, there's a rule, like after every meeting there has to be like a 15-minute break. You cannot have back-to-back meetings, because that immensely drains you. You have to be on for that like hour, and then you have to be on again the next hour and the 3 hours, and then you're just so exhausted. It's what I help my clients with, is having the confidence and courage to set boundaries for them and have those difficult, uncomfortable conversations of like, yeah, you know what, like what really helps me to perform at my best if we do this, whatever it is.
I think this boundary setting is something where I definitely personally can also take some good advice from you. What are some other actionable advice and tips that you would share with us when it comes to really implementing some of the flow habits into your daily work life? Like, what is it that I have to do, Kristel?
Well, I think the most beneficial would be doing something that will have, if it's one thing, doing something like figuring out what's the one thing that can have the most massive positive impact in your life. So there's specific flow triggers. That's where I would, and flow blockers. That's where I would start from. So the flow triggers are clear goals. So I would look at, okay, how do you set goals? And like, there's different types of goals as well. Not every goal is the same. And one goal set for a situation can actually block flow because it's the wrong goal for that situation, right? So then it's eliminating distractions. I think that's the big one of really like, I also work with my clients of like, okay, let's like turn off notifications and how do we eliminate, how to create that focus-filled life and work environment, And then there's challenge skills ratio. Ideally, your challenge should be only 4% higher than your skills. to be in flow, but we oftentimes, because there's this perfectionism and that imposter syndrome we all feel, then we tend to take on more. And that also what came out from why women leaders are leaving is the workload is so much and the expectations, because again, we're thinking in the time management perspective and everything has to be done yesterday. That actually pulls us out of flow. Right. And then there's autonomy, which is important. Autonomy in deciding how you work and when you work, ideally. Then immediate feedback is important. Having complexity, risk, and novelty in your work, and having that passion and purpose and curiosity in what you do. So I would pick one habit that you are somehow the weakest in those flow triggers.
I just want to recap here on this one thing that you say when it comes to goal setting. Do you have an example of what would be a good goal to set for me to get into a goal state?
Yeah. I think a simple example would be reading books, right? So that I'm just a random example. So I think another great goal would be like, I want to read 2 books a month. Because what happens, it's a big goal, right? It's like, okay, it's intangible. Okay, when will I do it? And that's how people become inconsistent. They're like, they really don't have that grasp. And okay, when will this happen? A clear goal is I will read 5 pages a day. Then it's very like, okay, I know, and then eventually you will read 2 books a month.
Wow, this is much better, and I think I would definitely take that on into my private life, because I want to read way more, and I really struggle to make the time to read more books. Just having a tangible small goal rather than a big goal, as you say, like 2 books a month, and just rather focusing on 5 pages a day. Do you have another one that might be work related?
It is work related, but it's also isn't it. I think it's what happens around work that really defines how you work. So that's like, for me, it was sleep. Like I create my routine and my life around sleep, that I get 8 hours of sleep. And like, if you don't sleep, then all your life areas kind of are less than ideal because of it. And one of the things, and like a great thing to do is leverage sunlight. So that's you can also use it during your work hours, because for flow you need very strong so what happens in our why we also feel digital overload is the first thing we typically do is look at our phones when we wake up. But the first hour of the day is when our brain learns the most. It's the best time for us to learn new things. But if you look at your phone and look at the news, you actually wire your brain to be anxious and reactive. So that also already impacts your workday as well. Instead, what you can do in the first hour, go spend time outside, look at direct sunlight, or like not look and just make sure, like without sunglasses, you just walk outside, because that sunlight actually gives a signal to our body to start our systems, just like your computer you have to start it up. And up until I recommend until 1 p.m. you want to have as many bright lights like above you and like near you as you can, because again, through our eyes, our brain gets the signal, aha, it's daytime. So it actually increases your energy levels. And then around maybe 4 p.m. you want to have start having like yellow lights.
I will run to get a digital light set up at home. I think this is so valuable input, because I struggle with the same thing, is staying up too late and getting up too early, which doesn't give me the 8 hours of sleep that I really need. Kristel, these were so many great insights from your side. Having heard about your entrepreneurial success story in the tech world, and now also having helped countless ambitious women to use the power of flow, what are some last tips you would share with me if I really want to thrive and make an impact in the tech sector?
Well, the very first thing that I've mentioned several times is start thinking in terms of energy management, not time management. It's really a great book. One of my favorite books around it is The Power of Full Engagement. It's and because as women we also have a menstrual cycle, right? And our energy actually ebbs and flows with our menstrual cycle, so we feel a little bit different in the 4 phases of our menstrual cycle. There's nothing wrong with you that you at one point you just suddenly feel more tired than the other, and you feel like that's what some women tell me, like, oh, I feel like inconsistent and something, I can't be consistent, there's something wrong with me. No, or you can be consistent but differently from a man, right? So really start thinking of energy management perspective, and then learn to get into a flow state, because it's also, and I actually don't think it's a coincidence, the flow cycle is very similar to our menstrual cycle. And it's very similar, like what the flow cycle different phases are and how you feel in the menstrual cycle different phases. It's very, very similar. So I don't think that's a coincidence. So I always feel like as women, we're meant to be in flow and to feel and perform at our best. And then the third thing is to tap into your body's wisdom and our intuition. We are evolutionary wired to be leaders as women, because we're kind of conditioned to think of the collective, what's best for the tribe, and to take care of our children, right? So we're very, very good at it. So, and because typically our connection to our bodies is a bit better, or a lot better than for men, so you can really trust that, intuition and make decisions from that place. And other thing is that's something that really coaching helps is having time for reflection. I think we should spend more time reflecting and being in silence than we think we need, because that's where creativity and clarity flourish, of what you really have to do. Like, really having, okay, what are the key things for me to do? What's just busy work? How can I work smarter? And with coaching, I help you mirror and gain clarity in, how you want to, in your work and life decisions, and how you want to lead your life. And the last part, which can be one of the big ones, in order to actually make changes, you have to work on your identity and mindset. So identity is how you see yourself as a person. And like there's blocking it. Like for me, my mindset identity was success only comes through hard work and self-sacrifice. So no tips will ever work if I don't change that mindset first. So these are my kind of tips.
Kristel, one last thing, where can people find you?
Typically in 2 places. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Kristel Tuul, my first and last name. We'll link the link in the show notes. And then on Instagram as well, same, Kristel Tuul. So these are my handles. And I also have a website, kristeltuul.com. So you can find me on there. And I post content and educate people, hopefully inspire people, so you can get some free tips as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for making time for being in the Brain Foods podcast, Kristel. It was an absolute pleasure to have you, and I really hope that all our listeners out there can have a flow-like day